Picture this. You're in front of your latest prospect, closing the biggest deal of your life. Your pitch decks were perfect. Your scripts, flawless. And when the time came to answer the golden question of, are you ready to move forward? Nothing happened. For everyone who loves sales, this is their worst nightmare. But fear not, because in this podcast, we're unraveling the enigma behind those missed opportunities. From appointments that evaporate to presentations that felt like a Broadway show but ended in awkward silence, we're dissecting it all. Welcome to Love Your Sales.
This podcast is presented by GenHead. GenHead leverages AI so small and medium-sized businesses can find their ideal clients to make more sales. Other companies talk about AI, but we are using it every day to drive down marketing costs and increase revenue. Learn more at genhead.com. That's genhead.com.
Welcome to another episode of Love Your Sales. I am so thrilled today. I have Dr. Jeff D. Standridge, who helps organizations and their leaders generate sustained results in the areas of innovation, strategy, profit growth, organizational transformation, and leadership. Jeff is an instrument-rated pilot in both single-engine and multi-engine aircrafts, formerly a vice president of Axiom Corporation. He has led established and startup business units in North and South America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Jeff serves as the managing director for Conductor, as well as Innovation Junkies, that also has a podcast where you are the co-host.
That's right.
That's awesome. He is the co-founder and managing partner of Candron Capital Partners and teaches in the College of Business at the University of Central Arkansas. He is also retired from the U.S. Army, Arkansas Army National Guard, where he was recognized in 2000 as the Soldier of the Year. This is quite a resume. I am so thrilled. You're also a speaker, trainer, consultant for numerous companies, organizations. You're an author of 3 books. So why don't you jump in, Jeff, fill in any of the blanks that I missed. I'm so thrilled to have you.
Well, I am so honored and pleased to be here. And I will tell you that really the only person who calls me Dr. Standridge is my wife, and she only does it when I do something really, really stupid. And she'll say, way to go, Dr. Standridge. So I get to hear Dr. Standridge quite often because I'm pretty prone to doing goofy things. So, it is really a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to visit with you about sales and all things sales and sales leadership.
Yeah, and you've written 3, right? 3 books? No, 5. 3. Oh, no, 3. Okay, 3.
3 books, yep.
So first, tell me a little bit about, the first book that you wrote and what inspired you to do that.
Yeah, technically there are 4, 3 in recent times. The first one I wrote back in 2005 with actually a pastor friend of mine.
Okay.
It's called The Abundance Principle: 5 Keys to Extraordinary Living, and we wanted to look at the Christian scriptures, but also the just religious literature, and we wanted to look at what were some guidelines there in terms of how we should be living our lives in order to experience a greater degree of fulfillment in the here and now, right? And then in 2018, I wrote a book called The Innovator's Field Guide. Followed that up in 19 with the Top Performers Field Guide. Much of my doctoral research back in the day was in studying the differences in top performers and average performers in the healthcare field, ironically, at that time. And then over time started expanding that research into software developers and database administrators and salespeople and marketing professionals and others. And then the work that I do with the Conductor is really more of a social enterprise focused on helping entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs in Arkansas, the state where I live,
Mhm.
with my co-author, Jeff Amorine, who runs an organization up in Northwest Arkansas called Startup Junkies. Or Startup Junkie is the name of the organization. And he has a podcast called Startup Junkies podcast. And we're really focused on helping start and grow companies in Arkansas. And we feel like that Arkansas is kind of an unexpected place because most of the venture capital is really on the coast. And we feel like that pretty much all over the heartland, inclusive of Milwaukee and others, are unexpected places. And we just wanted to share in that book, Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the subtitle. We wanted to share some of the things we've learned about the cultivation of what we call the 4 pillars of entrepreneurial ecosystem building: talent, culture, community engagement, and access to capital. So.
Wow. And you hit on so many different things when you were talking there. Obviously, mentoring, coaching, and
Mhm.
and you also talked about studying, what makes, you know, okay, or I don't know,
Top performers
mediocre.
versus average performers. Yeah.
Okay, average versus top performers. And throughout your study, was there an underlying like thing in every industry, or was it different as you were looking at different industries?
Well, there's certain nuances within each industry or within each job role within industries. But
Okay.
the thing that kind of crosses all industries, all job roles, really boils down to the degree to which one is able to balance results and relationships. So I think about the kind of the legal scales, right? Where you have one, and so with an R on each side, results for one and relationships for the other. If I focus on results at the expense of relationships, I will be wildly successful very, very quickly. That is until I alienate everyone around me who's responsible for helping me maintain those results. If, on the other hand, I am really heavily relationship focused at the expense of results, people will love me until they lose respect for me because I can't deliver the results that I am accountable for, and then I lose them both. And so, it really success in every endeavor really boils down, because we all have a bias. We're all kind of tendency toward one or the other. But the one who can really balance the two, begin to recognize when they're favoring one over the other and bring themselves back to that tightrope, so to speak, are the ones who really differentiate themselves. So another reason that I don't put a lot of stock in just being Dr. Standridge is because academic credentials don't matter, professional certifications don't matter, college degrees don't matter, grade point averages don't matter. It's about behavior. That's what differentiates top performers. Now, do all of those things give us a foundation upon which to behave better? Education and credentials and what have you? Of course, but they're threshold competencies. They're not what I call differentiating competencies.
Interesting. Very, very.
Take a sales example. I'll give you a sales example, right?
Mhm.
I have not been able. So the top performing salespeople and the average performing salespeople all experience what we call reluctance to the same degree. We can all find reasons why we can't go out and cold call or prospect or what have you. Oh, I got to get these invoices out. Oh, I've got to get these proposals out. Oh, I've got to do more research. Top performers and average performers experience call reluctance to the same degree. The differentiating behavior is those top performers put it on their calendar and they prospect religiously,
Right.
because they know the activity or inactivity in this 30 days will come home to roost in the next 60 to 90 days.
Right. Wow. I feel like you're in my brain. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I preach that because what you do, and I work with my clients on that. What you do today is going to be, seen in that 30, 60, 90 day
That's right.
time period. And I work with my clients on you have to do time blocking. If you're not doing time blocking, you will find every excuse in the world to not do the work, to
Well,
not make the calls.
You're doing good work then. That's
Right.
because I could not agree with you more.
Yeah. And so throughout those studies, you found that education, all of that is not necessarily the determining factor. It ultimately comes down to the balance between relationship and results.
Yeah, and Stephen Covey talked about that in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you know that
Hmm.
book that was written in the 90s was predicated on about 200 years of success literature, right? And he talked about the personal victory and the public victory, right?
Hmm.
His son Stephen M.R. Covey wrote The Speed of Trust, and he talked about character and competence.
Hmm.
Character, relationships; competence, results; personal victory, results; public victory, relationships. So, what my research found was not drastically different. I just kind of call it something different, but it's something that has manifest itself year after year after year, decade after decade. That I certainly, my life, my family tree was transformed by the education that I received. So I don't want to denigrate a formal education, but it gave me the MIPS between my ears to be able to understand and recognize that standing on a degree or standing on a credential or standing on, it's not going to really differentiate my success. It's going to be what I do with that information.
Right. Correct. And people can be highly, highly educated, but not have the ability. And here's a defining differentiator between you can be so unbelievably book smart, but have zero street smarts.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
And when I say street smart, it's more like that. I used to joke all the time with, people who are highly intelligent, like, great, you have all, and I'm not picking on them at all.
Understand.
But if you were to drop them in the desert, they would sit down and go, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do. Like I
The
don't know
odds are
how to."
against me. The odds are against me, so therefore I can't really counteract the odds.
Right. But you would drop somebody that has high, intuition, high street smarts, and you drop them in the same place and they'd be like, okay, let's figure out what I'm surrounded by. How do I get to water? And they would be very
Yeah.
scrappy, very like figure it out. And it's again, both of those are great. Having both of those is a
Yeah.
wildly powerful thing.
Completely
But
agree.
there are people out there that just they have one or the other, and you can gain both
Absolutely.
self-education. But
Yeah, my whole interest in this topic became so before I got into the business world, I was a paramedic and a respiratory therapist. That was my formal training at the undergraduate level. That's why I tell people I crammed a 4-year degree into 6 years, is because I worked full time through college as a paramedic and was a professor at the University of Arkansas for medical sciences, teaching in a cardiopulmonary respiratory therapy program. And I began to observe that some of my students who made straight A's from day one all the way till graduation couldn't hold a job. And then I had some people who were struggling to graduate with a C average who were wildly successful. And I began to say, well, what am I doing here? Right? We favor those who jump through all the hoops and make all of the academic credentials. We jump through hoops to really favor those, but they're not the ones who are making a difference necessarily, right? And so then we have these others who are struggling and they can be just as successful. So what is the differentiator? And that's kind of where my research interest came in that regard.
Right. And sometimes it comes down to this person has a wild ability to memorize and regurgitate information.
Sure.
That doesn't necessarily mean high, intellectual.
That's right.
High, some of those DISC assessments, all those,
Sure.
It's doesn't necessarily mean success, like high education. And again, we can digress down to this, I have wild opinions on, higher education. I believe education is important,
Sure.
but I also believe that testing needs to be less important, and that
So I have to comment on that, right? So completely agree. So I teach an entrepreneurial finance class to upper level undergraduates and MBA students, and we have no tests. I make them negotiate a contract with me at the very first 2 weeks of class for the grade of A, B, or C, which however much effort they want to put in, because those are all passing grades. I create a draft contract for the grade of A, B, and C, give it to them, and I say, you or your parents spent $1,200 for you to be in this class. in the next 3 to 5 years, you need to get, 5 to 7 to 10 times your value out of this class for it to be a good return on investment.
Mhm.
So take this draft contract, mark it up in track changes, send it back to me. I will accept some of your elements. I will counter propose other elements, and we'll go back and forth. And we will sign a contract by the second week of class, and you'll get a copy, I'll get a copy, and that'll be your grade for the semester, as long as you do everything that you've contracted for. If you fail to deliver the terms of your contract, you don't get the next lower grade. You fail the course. And so if you can renegotiate with me anytime up until the week before finals. So anyway, kind of off topic for here, but I agree with you. We are so aligned.
That's awesome. And that is not off topic, because in sales, we negotiate constantly. And I am of the mind that everybody is in sales.
Oh,
We are
completely agree.
constantly negotiating, whether it be with ourselves, our spouse, our parents, our whomever, whether it be for a piece of candy or for $20 so I can
Mhm.
go to see a movie. We are constantly negotiating.
Yes.
What we don't see is colleges, high schools saying that, hey, sales can be a job for you. It can be a career for you. We're only, really selling our students, our young, on the accountant, doctor,
Yeah,
those hard skills. We
that's
need
right.
to start teaching better on what you just said. Not only is it a hard skill, it's a soft skill as well, because now
Mhm.
we're actually using a different part of our brain that
Mhm.
allows us to be creative.
Mhm.
And
That's right.
that's creativity. It allows people to go, oh, okay, wait, I have the ability to, but now you're holding them accountable, and they have to hold themselves
That's right.
accountable to do what they said they're going to do in a contract that they've
Mhm.
negotiated themselves.
That's right.
That's so
That's right.
wildly valuable. I mean, and from if that was me, I'd be like, okay, I get to negotiate. Like, if I don't want to put in a lot of effort, hey, B is a
Yeah.
passing.
Yeah.
I-
And it kind of freaks them out the first day of class when I lay that out to them. But by the end of the semester, I've been doing that kind of teaching for 25 plus years, and they all come back to me, or they don't all come back. I have people who come back to me periodically over the years to say, I learned more about life in that class than
Right.
in any other scenario.
Right. And that's the most important thing, because
Mhm.
we need to set our college students up for life,
That's right.
not just for memorize this book, give
That's right.
me,
Yep.
pass this class,
Mhm.
or pass this test.
Mhm.
Because when you go into a real world working situation, you're not taking a test.
Well, it's like I said when I was a paramedic that, I had to take certain proficiency exams, both written knowledge exams and practical skill proficiency exams, in order to become a paramedic. But class started the first time you're in the back of an ambulance with a patient by yourself.
Mhm.
That's when school
Oh,
really starts.
right.
And so, same thing with flying, right? So I have to take a written exam and a practical exam for every rating that I have, and I have to demonstrate proficiency every couple of years in those areas. But that's just to make sure I have the base level of safety and knowledge and skill, not to be basically safe, not necessarily ultimately proficient.
Mhm. Right. Well, and if you think you're a military, you're a veteran.
Mhm.
When you went into basic training, there was no well, yes, there was a little bit of classroom training in here, but everything was, you're going to do it, you're going to live
Yeah,
it, you're going to go through physically,
that's
you're
right.
doing, there was no
Yeah,
classroom of,
yeah.
you're just thrown in, right?
Mhm.
They're training you every second of every day to do exactly what you need to do to survive if you're in a combat situation.
That's right. And it starts the moment you step off of the bus. If you've ever watched Officer and a Gentleman or any of the combat movies, with the moment you step off the bus, and there are 10 to 30 of you standing there at attention with a dozen drill sergeants circulating in and around and through you,
Yelling.
screaming at you, right?
And it's complete chaos. And you're like, what did I do?
Mm-hmm,
And then
mm-hmm.
6, 8 weeks, depending on, what you're in, what you
Yep.
signed up for, 12 weeks, 16
Mm-hmm.
weeks, all of the sudden you're a
A different
soldier.
human. Mm-hmm. That's
Right.
right. For
Right.
sure.
So let's talk a little bit more pointed, with a pointed direction here. You've taught a little bit about, or you've done some coaching with, leadership and development. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I
Mm-hmm.
really would love to dive into is, we kind of talked a little bit before we hit the record button on, helping organizations understand, or not understand, but helping them with leadership and development
Mm-hmm.
training.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that intrigues me is that organizations struggle sometimes to lead sales teams, especially
Mm-hmm.
large sales teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to get your take on the difference between leading, just a team and
Mm-hmm.
leading a sales team.
Yeah, that's a great question. You said something a few moments ago that I think is pivotal in this discussion, and that is that everyone is in sales. And, I always say that nothing happens until someone sells something. And if you are in a delivery function or a customer service function, or you are in accounting, or you are in facilities, you have a role in impacting the sales organization. And so I think for organizations to lead sales teams, they have to start by leading non-sales teams. They have to start by helping everyone understand that everything that they do has an impact on the selling process. And they need to be constantly sensitive and aware to whether they are adding to the selling process or they're taking away from the selling process. And so I think that's kind of numero uno, right?
Mhm.
Number two is the easiest thing to measure is the sales activity and the sales output. It's easier than any other function in the business other than maybe the finance function. But because it's the easiest thing to measure, it can sometimes be a little more difficult to lead it differently than the other functions.
Mhm.
But because it's easier to measure, it does in fact have to be led differently than the other functions. In some of those more abstract functions where it's difficult for them to see the direct correlation between their daily activity and the business results, we have to point them toward a vision, point them toward a direction, inspire them to move forward toward where the company's going, and build functional goals. We have to bridge that gap of that abstract gap. We have to bridge it with guidance and direction and what have you. The sales organization, it's a little different because if you've hired salespeople correctly, if you've onboarded them correctly, if you've trained them correctly, et cetera, you have been relentless in helping them understand the correlation between their activity and their accomplishment and the outputs that they generate. And so if they are the right people in the sales function, which we will assume that they all are, then really all you need is a framework. You need a direction. We give them sales targets, we give them sales quotas, or we give them a commission plan that may be more of an absolute plan where it's, tied directly to the amount of revenue they generate versus a quota. So it's either we put them on an absolute plan or a relative plan, and we give them kind of a target, so to speak. And then we say, go forth and prosper. Here are the boundaries where you need to seek additional guidance or get approvals or what have you. And we're going to make those boundaries as few and far between as possible because we don't want to create sales friction. And I'm here to help you. Whatever that means, I'm here to help you. So you call on me at any point, and I will touch base with you on a regular basis. I will see if there's coaching that I can give you. I will observe your activity and the correlation between that activity and the accomplishment, and I will engage myself to help you where I see, and you engage me to help you where you see the need.
And I love that. I love the concept of just building out the framework, because so often when I talk to sales individuals who have decided to leave organizations, it's, that when they've been there for, either whether they've been there for, 6 months and they're like, yeah, I was out of there. And I'm like, why did you, why, what happened? And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see myself being successful because, and it always comes down to, my boss just, like micromanager. And I just,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they want me to do it this way and only this way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you don't think you can be successful that way? And they're like, well, no, that's not the way I sell. I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
have you been successful doing it your way? And yeah, I mean, I've always had wild success. And I'm like, okay. And then I've had other people who are like, oh yeah, management changed. And now, they're calling me every single day saying, what were your numbers today? How many
Mm-hmm.
phone calls did you make? How many? And salespeople get overwhelmed by
Yeah.
managers who have the best of intentions, but all of a sudden these salespeople feel like they can't
Mm-hmm.
breathe. They're like the life is being squeezed out of them by a manager who has the best intentions, but doesn't understand that most salespeople put the bar much higher for themselves than
Mm-hmm.
anybody else. I should say,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and I should say most great
They're
salespeople.
the best salespeople. That's right. There are a couple of things I want to talk about there that you spurred a thought in me. One is we have this thing called Salesforce automation tools and Salesforce automation systems. And one of my pet peeves is that all of the workflows and all of the outputs and everything in that Salesforce, we tell the salespeople that it's built to help them be successful, but it's really built to help the managers understand whether or not they're doing the activity, right?
Right.
And so, let's get that straight. And I do a lot of coaching with sales people all over the country. And that is probably one of the greatest impediments that I see is they sell a Salesforce automation system, and they sell it to their teams as this is to help you be successful, when in reality, all the workflows and all the functionalities about monitoring. It's literally about monitoring for the sales managers. So getting that right is important. The other thing I think is important, I always start with the end result. And I tell my sales folks, look, if you demonstrate to me that you are progressing against the expected outcomes, right? Because even if I put you on an absolute target where you're paid a percentage of revenue, I have to plan on about how much you're going to deliver, because I have to have delivery resources and manage the expenses to deliver that revenue. So if you're hitting your, monthly, quarterly revenue goals, revenue targets that we've mutually agreed, then, and you're not stepping outside the framework, great. If you're not hitting your goals, then I'm going to step back one more, and I'm going to look at your pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, tell me what your pipeline looks like. If you're not hitting your goals and your pipeline is weak, then and only then am I going to really look at your activity.
Right.
And if you're not hitting your goals and your pipeline's weak and you're not hitting your activity, well, that's when I'm probably going to invite you to pursue opportunities in someone else's company. Because you
I
have
love
to
how you said that.
Yeah. So you have to understand the connection between the two. But good salespeople and good sales leaders, good sales managers, in my opinion, go to the end and manage against the end, and only then kind of back into the remediation of a salesperson if the other building blocks are non-existent.
Right. And a great sales manager is, if you have a solid team in place, the majority of the conversations that you should be having with your team are, how are you doing today? What can I do to help you?
That's right.
And pretty much just lifting them up and reminding them that they're doing a great job. Like, are there any, and working on the weaknesses and leaving the strengths alone.
Yeah.
They're already
removing the organizational obstacles, right? I was
Correct.
leading a fairly large sales organization in a publicly traded company, and I started hearing, as I was asking that question, what can I do to help? What can I do? What do you need from me? What's getting in your way? What keeps you awake? Et cetera. I was hearing about just the administrivia, just the paperwork burden, the delivery function burden. And so I actually had my team do what I called a sales velocity study. and just said, look, I want you to track your time for 2 weeks. I don't want to put an additional burden on you, but I want to understand where you're spending your time.
Mhm.
So they came back and collectively across, I don't know, 30 or 40 salespeople, they gave me kind of 2 weeks worth of time. And I quantified how much time they were spending on non-selling related activity. And it led me to do two things. Number one, I created a new role called an associate account executive. And it was a junior level person who came into the organization. I paired them up with 3 or 4 salespeople and basically gave them a small bonus that was tied to the collective success of those 4 salespeople. And they were responsible for taking anything off of their plate that wasn't direct sales related activity. So chasing paper, chasing a contract, chasing a scope of work, getting signatures from clients, all of those kinds of things. That was number one. The other thing that I did is I sat with my peer across the organization who ran the delivery function, and we prioritized the list of delivery tasks that they were having to get involved in and figured out how to streamline his organization in order to help the salespeople. It paid huge dividends. I mean, to the tunes of millions of dollars of better sales performance.
Right. And 9 times out of 10, being a sales, professional throughout my entire career, 9 times out of 10, whenever a manager would come to me and be like, "What is your frustration?" It would be, oh, the process to onboard or chasing down a client to get XYZ, getting them to sign a contract. It's all, every time I talk to a salesperson, what is your least favorite function of your job? Paperwork.
Yeah.
Why? Because great salespeople, they don't want to be sitting at their desk filling out paperwork. They want to
That's right.
be out there making connections, making phone calls, having meetings. That's where most of them, I don't want to say all of them, but that's where most of them, that's their working genius. That's their
Agreed.
area of, true mind-blowing like expertise, is having those conversations
Mhm.
and really bringing in new business.
For sure.
They get bogged down. And when we're not working in our area of genius, it takes us longer to do what we have to do because we're not great at it.
That's right.
And so what normally would take probably somebody who enjoys that 15 minutes takes the other person an hour.
And everyone suffers when that happens.
Correct.
Because nothing happens until somebody sells something. And if the people who are bringing the revenue into the company are facing obstacles at every turn, guess what? That affects everyone downstream.
So what is your advice to sales leaders, and how do you help sales leaders become better?
First and foremost is I try to drive that philosophy that if they've moved into being a sales leader from leading other functions, that it's different, and help them understand the philosophy behind everyone as a salesperson. Number 2 is to have them talk to their salespeople, to ask some open-ended questions versus, "Are you doing okay?" Many salespeople say, "Yeah, sure." But to ask, "What can I do to help? What's getting in your way? Where are you spending your time? If you had a magic wand and you could wave it, what one thing would you change about the way this organization supports you?" Because you ask that across enough salespeople, you're going to start hearing some themes. And then your job as the sales leader, your number one job as the sales leader, is to remove obstacles from the salesperson's path so that they can do what they do best. They can stay in their zone of genius.
Right.
So helping them understand that. And then the other thing that I do is helping them understand the framework, kind of the boundaries and the frameworks that they need to put in place to help manage those salespeople, lead those salespeople better than manage them. Number one, I tell them, just like I tell my own salespeople, I'm not going to micromanage you. If I have to micromanage you, you are in the wrong role or in the wrong organization. So, I'm going to look at the outputs, then I'm going to look at the pipeline, then I'm going to look at the activity. And when you're a new salesperson and you're building your pipeline and your sales outputs for the first time, then we're going to focus on activity. There's going to be activity you need to do every single week, and you're going to need to report on that activity. But my hope is once you start getting the taste of sales, we will then move to focusing more on your pipeline. Then when you get that, we'll focus on more on the outputs.
Right. That's awesome. Now, I had another topic that I wanted to discuss with you, but we are coming to time. This has been such an amazing, engaging conversation. So before we, I give everybody their 30-second shameless pitch to, promote themselves. So, Jeff, why don't you take the opportunity to do that?
Sure. Where I spend the most of my time today is with Innovation Junkie. Innovation Junkie is an organization that's focused on helping companies create sustained strategic growth. We do that through a variety of mechanisms. We have what we call our growth diagnostic, which gives them and their leadership teams the opportunity to evaluate their company against 70 some odd best practices in the areas of revenue velocity, leadership effectiveness, organizational operational effectiveness, digital readiness, innovation readiness, and financial disciplines. And then from that, we help them put together a plan to remediate those deficiencies in order to help their organization grow. So that's where I spend the majority of my time today. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with any of your listeners that want to just connect and talk.
That's amazing. And all of your websites, all of your information is going to be in the show notes. So if somebody wants to reach out to Jeff, you can find that in the show notes. Jeff, I am so excited and grateful to have the privilege to talk with you today. I really appreciate it. It's been an awesome conversation.
Well, it has been an honor and a privilege for me, and you're doing the Lord's work, so keep it up.
Thanks for joining us for Love Your Sales. For more, connect with Leighann on LinkedIn, and be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear what you think. Looking for a way to take your sales process to the next level? Visit us at loveyoursales.com to find out more about how Leighann can take your organization to new revenue heights. And be sure to join us next time for more great ways to love your customers so they love your sales.